Today, when I talk to Jason, we're going to talk a little bit about the business that we're in as it is currently constituted, which is a business which is about content, and it's about brands, and it's about audiences, and we'll explore those three areas. But Jason, one of the things I just wanted to start with was, having come here nearly a year ago as an outsider, you probably had some expectations about what it was going to be like. How have they matched your experience in your initial impressions of this industry?
I actually tried to approach it with very few expectations because of excuse me, the changing nature of the field that we're in. But to answer your question, really, when I came here, what I've been surprised by and really delighted by is a number of things. So first of all, the fact that the welcoming at the Telegraph and really all of Fleet Street has been incredibly warm and open to, as you say, an outsider. Not only an outsider from the television industry, although I have a long history as a newspaper editor, but God forbid an American outsider. And it's really been an incredibly warm welcome. More to the point, though, I've been really gratified by how the team at the Telegraph has taken up the charge, really, to move to a digital native approach to journalism, and really take on, and it's an incredible challenge to take on a transformation, not just of your day-to-day workflow, of how you approach commissioning stories, but your entire culture. It's something that's quite unsettling, if you let it be unsettling. It's quite energizing and empowering if you take that sort of mindset, and that's really what the team at the Telegraph has adopted.
I mean, one of the things that seems to be happening at the Telegraph and also elsewhere is new languages coming in. Talk of digital native, talk of chief content officers, talk of content rather than journalism and articles and scoops.
Right.
Why is that change in language taking place? And I mean, are we losing something by doing that?
Well, so Rufus, I have to admit that chief content officer is not a title that kind of sort of rolls off the tongue and has that's kind of the majesty and history of something like editor-in-chief. So it's a bit more of an awkward title than editor-in-chief. But it's important. Words are important, and accuracy in words are important. And when we look at what an editor does these days, or what an editor-in-chief does these days, it's a completely different world from when I was editing a newspaper, 15 years ago. Back then, I really was editing. I was editing articles, I was editing photos, editing headlines, commissioning stories. It was an intense but really contained and focused set of content. These days, you don't edit Google Hangouts, you don't edit Facebook, you don't edit Twitter, you do edit video, but video is certainly not an article. There's the whole new spectrum of virtual reality goggles. We're experimenting with virtual reality goggles. Someday soon, there'll be reporters out in the field who will, and your audience, our audience, will be experiencing the reporter's, not just his words and the vision, but the actual 360-degree landscape by putting out the viewer, the audience will put on their virtual reality goggles and experience that journalism as if they were there. So to say that, I'm editor of a virtual reality experience is not quite accurate. So agree that we do lose something in that chief content officer doesn't have the kind of the history and resonance of something like editor-in-chief, but in terms of accuracy, in terms of where the industry is actually going, the exciting new technologies that we're going to be able to deliver much more and a much broader experience to the audiences, and not just content experiences, but advertising experiences. It's probably appropriate that we change the nomenclature.
Well, you describe a future which is very different from how we've operated in the past, and I can see the real excitement in that. and it feels as if the hierarchies are changing and people are having to reinvent themselves. What within that stays the same? I mean, is everybody having to reinvent everything, or are there some things which remain constant?
I think, for better or worse, we live in a world today where we're all reinventing our jobs and ourselves every day. How many of you in the last couple of years had to reinvent your jobs? I mean, it sort of comes with the territory these days, and it's not easy, it's not comfortable for anyone, because we're human beings and change is something we're sort of hardwired to resist. But the reality is that everyone at the Telegraph, at least, everyone from the newest graduate intern, graduate trainee, to Boris Johnson, and our other famous columnists. I mean, Boris Johnson is now doing videos. He's doing Google Hangouts for us. It's something that, the good news is, almost all of them are excited about it. It's fun, it's a new challenge, it's a way to develop a larger audience, it's a way to expand your own professional development. So yes, we are in a world of constant change. Unless history reverses itself, the change is only going to accelerate. And I don't think there's any industry where that's not the case.
Given that change, I mean, one of the things that has been sacrosanct in the past is this division between the commercial side of the business and the editorial side of the business. And now increasingly there are opportunities thrown up because of new technologies, and there's talk of native advertising. Whether that's a new thing or has been around forever, we can debate. But how do you navigate the blurring of those boundaries at the Telegraph? And do you think, at the beginning of something very new?
Well, yes and no. So native advertising, as you suggested, it's been around for a long time. I'll date myself here. I first saw native advertising in the New York Times in the 1970s. They would have, ExxonMobil would have an article, an opinion column on the op-ed page of the New York Times regularly. And it was fine because it was labeled. And really, it's pretty binary, it's pretty simple. Native advertising is not a threat to the tenets of journalism. It's not a threat to what we hold dear. It's not a threat to accuracy and impartiality, as long as it's labeled, as long as we're not trying to confuse the reader. And it's in no one's interest to confuse the reader or confuse the audience. Advertisers don't want to confuse the audience, and journalists certainly don't want to confuse the audience. So native advertising, to me, is something that we've adopted. The Telegraph has a group called Create, which actually creates advertising, video. We did a wonderful video for Audi recently, and so we do all sorts of multi-platform content for advertisers. That's separate, that's not in my group, that's separate from the editorial folks, but it feeds off and it maintains the heritage of quality, the legacy of quality that the Telegraph is known for.
I mean, given the opportunities now that there are on all of the new platforms, are you finding that you're working in a different way with your commercial partners from the way you have in the past?
Yes, so when I grew up in newspapers, I rarely, as an editor, if ever, interacted with the commercial side. And at the Telegraph today, we're very much driven by the audience. We focus on the audience. We use data to focus on the audience. And we also realize that there's no sense growing, if you're only going to grow an audience and get to 70, 80, 90 million unique users worldwide, for the sake of being able to say you've got 70 or 80, 90 million users worldwide, and you're not able to monetize them, then it's just a vanity metric. So I meet every day with Dave King, who's head of commercial at the Telegraph, And he needs to know what we're working on. He certainly doesn't, he needs to know. And I need to know what advertisers are going to be online or in the paper. So we coordinate very closely.
Yeah.
But there's still that, I think it's like most things in life these days, it's not as binary as it used to be. It used to be church, state, and never the twain shall meet. And these days, it's much more nuanced, much more sophisticated, in a way that certainly advertisers are not influencing the news agenda, but we realize that in order for the Telegraph to succeed, we need to serve our customers, and our customers are the audience and the people who pay the bills.
Could we talk a little bit about your audience? And you've seen tremendous growth on the digital side recently. Where is it heading? What's your vision for what the audience is going to look like in the near future?
Well, we have seen significant growth over the last 6 months or so. We're up in the last quarter, we're up 70% year on year when it comes to UK page views. And again, I'm sure you're all flooded with data, I'm sure that any panelist here can pick a data point that makes his or her publication look like great growth, because there's so many. There's UK uniques, worldwide uniques, UK page views, worldwide page views. For us, the real focus is UK, growing our pool of engaged users, of people who not just come to the website and look at one page and then they're gone and come back maybe 2 months later, but really growing engagement. Engagement is the key to success in the digital world. So we're very much focused on getting the page views per session up, getting the visits per month up, and most importantly, raising the number of people, the number of page views in the UK, because the UK is where our bread and butter is. We've got a very large worldwide audience. We've got 25 to 30 million uniques each month in North America, but from a commercial perspective, they're not nearly as valuable to us as our UK audience. So we focus intently on that UK audience and on growing that audience. And as I said, UK page views year on year are up 70% in the last quarter. Now, a lot of that growth has to do with mobile and increasing the number of the engagement on mobile. It used to be that we weren't seeing much engagement at all. People were using our mobile, our handheld app, but they weren't engaged. They were using our mobile, they were accessing the website via mobile and seeing that experience, but they weren't engaged. So we focused on overhauling both of those experiences, and I've seen that level of engagement go up significantly.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you've said in the past that quality journalism wins, but some of the figures you're talking about could also be applied to digital-only organizations. So when you talk about the importance of quality journalism, how does that play in the overall picture?
Right. I do believe with all my heart that quality, in the long run, quality wins. Quality is what separates us from all the other digital competitors out there. So how does that, but you've got a good point, because it's also true that if we wanted to, if the goal was that vanity metric to get to 100 million, 120 million unique users, and it was all about traffic, it's not that difficult to jack up your traffic by doing the types of stories that wouldn't fit with the Telegraph brand. The problem with that approach is twofold. One is that you denigrate the brand. We've established a brand over 160 years that stands for trust and honesty and integrity and a certain approach to the news. And we certainly would never do anything to endanger that. But the other, just from a purely commercial perspective, the other thing that's important, why we don't just chase numbers and chase volume, is that we're targeting a certain type of audience, a certain type of demographic. that has traditionally been associated with the Telegraph. A relatively affluent demographic, a demographic that's very engaged and passionate about the brand. And if they're not within that demographic, and fortunately for us, it's a demographic that advertisers love, but if they're not within that demographic, it's really not, and we use a lot of data to quantify this and to focus our efforts. It's really not worth a lot of us spending a lot of time chasing that just to have the vanity metric of being able to say, oh, we're bigger than they are or they are.
And with the brand, how do you manage to retain consistency of the Telegraph brand when it's in the paper form? I think with all newspapers, people have a very clear idea about where they stand and what their personality is. When you move on to mobile and tablet and glasses and watches, how do you manage to maintain that brand consistency?
It's a great question, and what it really involves is looking at the customer and doing, as I said, we're very focused on the data. We're in the old world. I used to love the old world of journalism because when I was an editor, if I had a gut feel about something, I would go after it. And 80% of the things, probably close to 100% of the things that the stories that I commissioned were, my news judgment or my gut feel about something. It's probably 80%. The other 20 were the ones that the person above me told me to do. These days, that gut feel or that news judgment is still important, but it needs to be informed by data. So everything we do is really filtered through. It's really about this. You look at the data, you filter it through the qualities of the brand, and then you make decisions about what we commission, what we don't commission, the types of stories that we do, the types of videos we do, the types of Google Hangouts we do, the types of columnists we sign up, the types of bloggers we sign up. And it's, I forgot the question.
Well, I was just talking about the brand and the fact that it must be difficult maintaining consistency across the different platforms.
So the different platforms is a very intriguing challenge because in print, everybody knows what the Telegraph stands for. Slightly right of center, Torygraph, and in the print world, where there were half dozen or so competitors, fewer if you just look at kind of quality broadsheets, that was a great way to kind of position yourself and differentiate ourselves from the Guardian, to some extent from the Times, and the others. So that works very well in a world of half dozen competitors. Doesn't work quite so well or at all in a world of 1,000 competitors across the internet, because we could, if we're going to position ourselves internationally as just based on our political leanings, you really have to go pretty far to the extreme one way or the other. So the Guardian, appears to be positioning itself to the left of the New York Times, and they've been successful in growing an audience, particularly in North America, by positioning themselves there. But you have to go pretty far to the left to stake out that territory. And that's not the direction we move. So then you look on the right, and you've got Fox News and other pretty far right websites that we would not ever position the Telegraph to the right of those. So then you ask yourself, well, can we carve out a international brand identity as the sensible conservative site? And to some extent, yes, that attracts a certain amount of audience, but at the end of the day, that's in the web. In order to break through the noise, it's more powerful to be pretty extreme, either right or left. So a positioning of the sensible conservative brand is more difficult. So on the web, and digital, we're really much less. It's not that we've forsaken our political identity at all, but we have to supplement that with the the identity of being an incredibly reliable, trustworthy place to come and consume news.
I mean, those qualities that you describe are common to some of the competitors that you had offline, those traditional newspaper competitors. Are we, with the increased competition, witnessing a battle between the technology companies that are moving into the news space and editing, for example, the dreadful beheadings on Twitter, they've been edited out, so they're making actually editorial decisions, battling the news organizations with the trusted brands that are moving into the technological space?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't really view it as a battle. I think there is a battle there, but it's a different battle. The question that you asked is, are we in a battle with Google and Facebook and Twitter and Apple? The answer is no. And the answer is yes. They're frenemies. They are both friends. We need them. They provide incredible distribution. We've got great relationships with Apple. Murdoch McLennan and Tim Cook are good friends. We've got great relationships with Google. We've had a lot of exclusive Google Hangouts that they've promoted. Facebook, Twitter, we've got great relationships with all of them and symbiotic relationships. But at the same time, they are competitors for the audience's eyeballs. We think they're more friends than competitors because mostly people are on those platforms are doing things beyond other than consuming news. It's really more about games or video consumption to some extent, entertainment video. It's really games and entertainment are the big things on those platforms, where of course are mostly about news and entertainment. So the battle, because there is a battle, there's an important battle. The battle is not between us, the Telegraph, and the technology companies. It's between the Telegraph and our other brother and sisters on Fleet Street against the digital startups, the digital news startups, the and defining news very broadly, BuzzFeed, Huffington Post, Vox.com. This is the new fad in Silicon Valley. The VCs seem to be, are funding a lot of content companies. They're the ones that I worry about because they move very quickly. They have a culture that's is dangerous in two ways. It's dangerous because they're generally cultures that are younger, not chronologically, not in terms of the age of the people there, but just they're younger companies, so they have cultures that move more quickly. They're also dangerous because they don't have the history and credibility and ground rules and traditions of newspapers relative to what you see produced by newspapers digitally, the content, you have a greater possibility of the content being somewhat dodgy, to be blunt. Mm. So they're the ones that, and I love the competitive energy of Fleet Street. I think it's wonderful how because we're all located within a shouting distance of each other, basically, that we know each other and we're competitive with each other, and that energy actually I think gives us a bit of an advantage versus what I saw in the U.S., where the newspapers are all spread out and they're all single newspaper towns, and they don't have that competition. They're more monopolies, and monopolies tend to get fat and lazy and don't know how to compete. I think Fleet Street has this energy and competitive spirit, and we need to turn that competitive energy against the pretenders to the throne, the digital startups.
What are the best pieces of ammunition you think we have on our side in that battle?
Beyond a doubt, it's the credibility. It's the brand credibility. I mean, would you, if your son or daughter's life depended on it, would you trust something that you read in the Telegraph or in Huffington Post? So it's the brand, it's the long, hundreds of years commitment to quality, accuracy, integrity, not flying by the seat of your pants. It's those two things. It's the brand equity, the brand trust, and the fact that, and they're totally interrelated, and the fact that we've had for decades and centuries in some cases, systems in place to ensure that the content, the articles, and now in the future the virtual reality experience from the Ukraine. Imagine having that experience in Ukraine or Iraq where you feel like you're there because you're immersed in. How many of you have worn virtual reality goggles? I can't imagine hardly anyone. Well, one. Okay. Come to the Telegraph. We've got a pair there in our experience room, and happy to let you try it. It's a fascinating experience where you really feel like you're there. You're surrounded. It's a 360-degree experience, and that's how a number of years from now people will be consuming news. And it would, from that experience to the traditional article, I think we've got this history of doing it right and doing it in a way that's accurate, and it's almost got that seal of approval, a seal of trustworthiness.
Fantastic. I'm afraid we could talk for many more minutes, but that's all we've got time for, and that's a very good note on which to end. Jason, thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your insights and your time. Thanks very much. It was great.